Welcome to The Blueprint, a podcast for you and your life as a professional. The people I have conversations with don't have to be famous. They have to be making a living doing what they do. My goal is to get you the information you need to make real decisions. Start a career, change a career, get your money right, and get a handle on your operations. This is a Career Day in a Box podcast. I am Philip Lanos, and maybe this is the blueprint for you. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. I have Myanna Dellinger, who is running for judge in Superior Court of Los Angeles. Now, as you know, I posted saying that I was going to be interviewing a lot of people on the ballots, of people that I deemed were interesting enough to speak to and who I was able to find easily publicly, because I do believe that if you want to be a person of public office or public positions, you should be able to be found easily publicly. Let alone, this is also a law professor who has outstanding credentials and graduated at the top of her class. And we even get into not just understanding how the court system works in terms of how much power a judge has and where they don't really have power and how it all works, and such as criminal law cases actually being more tried by the jury than it is by the judge itself, and how the judge plays a role in that dynamic. It's really an interesting and fascinating episode if you don't have a lot of understanding, especially someone like myself who doesn't have a criminal background. I'm not privy to a lot of that information, and I imagine a lot of you who are listening also don't have a lot of that experience. And it's important to understand exactly how much influence takes place when we elect people like Myanna, who do come from a more diverse background, where it isn't a white male. This is someone who wasn't born here, but has been naturalized as a citizen and has earned every right to be on this ballot. And there's even some interesting ballot information you're going to learn about, what it takes, like what it costs to even be on the ballot. It's really an episode for anyone looking to learn more about how and where they should vote, where they should place their vote. But also, it does also take a turn towards the end where, if you've ever considered a career in law, this is the blueprint for you. And now, without further ado, Myanna Dellinger. Thank you for coming to the show, Myanna Dellinger. I am super humbled that you took the time to jump on this little podcast of mine to help educate my listeners and myself, frankly, on the basics of civics and why it is you're running and why we should consider the vote strongly for you.
Yes, no, you're welcome. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Yes. So it doesn't sound like you're from Los Angeles. Is that correct?
I was born, I have an accent I can't get rid of. Apparently, that is correct. I was born and raised in Denmark, and I was there into my young adult years. And then I moved here to Huntington Beach, and now I'm in LA.
I think that's cool, though. So because I didn't even know. I thought you had to be from the States in order to run for even local government, but that's cool.
Yeah, no, I think you have to be a U.S. citizen, and I was naturalized a lot later than I came for a long other procedural story or whatever, but I'm a naturalized U.S. citizen. So I am an American. I also hold dual citizenship, so I'm also a Danish citizen and thus an EU citizen, so kind of international.
No, that's cool. That's cool. And so what encouraged you to even consider politics and running into law and just in that direction in general? Was that a passion of yours that was always your passion, or do you have some story where you felt an injustice, experienced an injustice, and decided this is what I want to do?
Yeah, sure. No, thanks. That's a great question. So again, I'm running to be judge for seat number 72, so people can check me out at dellingerforjudge.com. Just a little plug right there.
Sure.
So I will say judges are not lawmakers. They do common law, so they're not politicians, as doing this, that, and the other for city council or federal government or the Trump-Biden thing or whatever. But for some reason, California still has a system in which some judges, to be judges, run for office. So it's an election. And so that's great. So that's what I'm doing. I'm running to be hopefully elected by the people to be judge, sort of as one of my slogans is a judge of, for, and by the people. There's various ways you could become judge. The governor can also appoint them. But so, no, I'm not really, I like politics as such and I follow it privately, but no, I don't want to ever be in the political politics kind of thing. I'm just running to be judge and sort of from my platform. And so to answer that, so that's, good because it's not political. It really truly is or should be nonpartisan, officially at least, but it's, as we see with the Supreme Court nomination of Amy Coney Barrett that I'm sure we'll go through, it kind of ends up being political in the end. But regardless, that's what I'm doing. And so the injustice I've seen and why I'm interested in it is that I think, I was number one in my class. I've taught law for over a decade. I have people imitating me, saying that they're also law professors. So look up people's credentials and whether or not they are. I really, truly am teaching law at a real school that has a high bar passage rate and so forth. And so I'm good with the law. And I posted my whole resume online so people can see. So I'm good with both the law, reading it and writing about it and dealing with people about it. And I think that's what judges should be, good at, obviously, having legal skills, but also being good with people. And so that's why I chose to do it. And I'm seeing a lot of injustices. And I think more importantly, and maybe for your listeners, I think judges as part of the government should resemble, government branches really should resemble what real people are like in LA County. We're very sort of international and diverse and progressive or modern or open-minded society, yet the judiciary, I think, needs more input like that. And so with my background, sort of, I'm an immigrant, I'm a female in a very male-dominated field. I have some ideas about how, we might be able to cooperate with law enforcement and others for some better societal solutions. That's just sort of what I thought, why I wanted to do it and what I could contribute with shortly. It's something different. There's a lot of prosecutors, deputy district attorneys that run for office and that become judges, and that's the way it is. And most of them, or a lot of judges, come from that background. But I do think some other diversity in professional backgrounds can also add a lot to, especially in LA County, when a lot of us are very different. It's not all one thing.
No, yeah, and that's exactly. Thank you, first of all, for the correction and helping me distinguish between what it means to have a judge be elected and on the ballot, and how it's not necessarily related to politics, but it is local government. Right. And you brought up a very good point, and that is that with everything that's going on right now in the social climate of things, being able to elect who is enforcing laws and sentences is important, and to be able to know you can trust the person that's behind this seat and that you're a familiar face, you're easy to find publicly. All of those things definitely play a huge role, because it does feel, it may not be, I don't know the actual literal balancing act, but it does feel like it's a little one-sided, where there's a lot of leeway for officers. My sister's husband is a police officer out in Texas, or was. He changed out due to all the stress, but I empathize with the fact that, that's a real person. They have a family they have to support. And then, there's all the things that are happening that doesn't necessarily help their public relations,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so, not to be overly critical, but just to state facts that, frankly, I've been criticized for, because some interests here in society would rather that sort of some certain things are just hushed up, and judges, just as they tend to do in the past, or judicial candidates just promising to be neutral and fair, which of course we will be, and we're not prejudging anything, and I'm not either. But I am pointing out facts, that the facts are such that deputy district attorneys cooperate, and that's what they do as prosecutors with the police department. And we've seen that over the past 20 years in LA County, there's been around 900 incidents of police brutality, and one single one of those police officers charges was brought against him. And that's just not right. So there's just something that I think, and we know the district attorney's office, so Jackie Lacey or George Gascon, are debating this publicly, and I don't have an opinion on which one of those, or at least not enough. I do have a private opinion, but not a public opinion on which one of those two win. But we know that there's definitely, like you just pointed out, some things going on that need to be rectified. And I think, I'm not saying we should get rid of all police officers and all that kind of stuff. We need the police. I will cooperate with them when I win all law enforcement. But I am saying that there are some uncomfortable things going on that we need to look at. And how do judges play into that? So officially they don't, but I'm just worried that, or not, I'm concerned that quite a large percentage of judges come from former prosecutorial backgrounds. And I think it's great, and they are hopefully impartial. I'm just saying, I think to balance things out right now until we know what better to do, we need some diversity in professional backgrounds and some other experience and some critical voices and some people that haven't worked, I think personally, so closely with law enforcement until they figure out their side of the whole problem. So just some, we know how diversity actually always helps, and not just doing the same thing we've done for so many years. So that's where I come into the picture, that bringing something neutral and an outside voice and, a strong female voice, and, it won't be a rubber stamp, but something critical into the whole debate. And, again, I'm not saying, of course, all police officers are not bad. Most of them are good, but I am questioning privately their, for instance, the code blue of, if somebody's doing something, isn't that what they call it? If something is doing something bad, they're not wanting to rat on each other. And, I think that's within their realm, but I think they need to have that discussion. But I think in the meantime, I'm just promoting some judicial reform from all angles and some new outside looks on things, and a little bit of, a critical voice that I will help provide without being biased one way or another, but also without being yet another prosecutor. And I think that's healthy for the government. Again, I think the government, including judges, should resemble more of what real LLA is like. And it's not just a white elite male, pardon me, but system that we've seen for a lot of years. We need some other voices, and I would be one of those.
Sure. Now, there's obviously so I don't understand the way the local courts are broken down. I mean, they don't really teach you that in school.
Right.
It's kind of
Right.
weird actually that they don't really take the time to break down something that impacts you the most.
Yeah.
So maybe you can help me understand, because obviously there's more than one judge. There's a lot of courts. There is the major court in downtown Los Angeles.
Yes.
And is that where you're looking to be seated?
Yes, not necessarily in downtown Los Angeles. So you're right, and I'm glad to see that finally people are paying attention to local judges, because we know we can't vote on, for instance, Amy Coney Barrett or any of those at the Supreme Court, but we know we can vote of us potential local judges, which is also really important, right? The day-to-day solutions you talked about. So here's how it works. So in the LA Superior Court system, that's actually the trial court system and not anything despite sounding superior. It's not. It's the trial court system. There's about 500 judges in all of LA County. I forget how many courthouses there are, but a whole bunch of them. A lot of them in LA, but actually LA County goes all the way up to Lancaster, Palmdale, and all the way down to Long Beach and Torrance and over to Avalon Island. So it's a huge, huge county. And there's all these courthouses, and there's about 500 judges. All of them have a number for, I guess, just human resource reasons or whatever. So the numbers, and my number is 72, doesn't actually mean anything other than there was a lady judge who retired or announced her retirement. And then I just thought, this is just the number. This is good enough. Doesn't mean anything else than that. So if, or hopefully when I win, and the other folks too, there's about 10 that are elected every other year or so. Most are appointed by the governor, but then under the California Constitution, voters can elect some every other year. And so the way that works is when the winners then in those seats that are open, like I said, an average of 10 people every other year, then they will work with the presiding judge, so the boss, and, they rotate in turns within the system of who's presiding judge, on where physically, so geographically, they would like to be the newly elected judges and what issues they would like to work with. And so in my case, I'm privately, I live close to the Old Town Pasadena area, so obviously I'd like to be geographically close to, this area, someplace downtown LA or, anywhere really, But also there's actually many more types of judges than just criminal law judges. So I've gotten a lot of questions about criminal law issues. And that's important, obviously. And I think that might be most of them. But there's also small claims, there's traffic, there's drug, there's juvenile court, there's, homeless court. Even there's a lot of other, or some other types of judges too. So you would basically work when you win with the presiding judge on where physically you'd like to work and on what issues you'd like to work. And then, but obviously they put you where they think they have a need. and you're considered, we have law degrees, we're all qualified to run because the State Bar of California or the Constitution says you're qualified to run if you've been in the legal field and in good standing for at least 10 years. And so then you're considered, in short, to be smart enough to figure out these different things. So the judges will work with you again, in short, on where you want to work and what you want to work with.
Okay. So at some point, you will have the seat of presiding judge where you're the one that's the boss for that time.
No. So again, there's that would be a huge honor, and but that's like so there's a boss. So there's about 500 sitting judges, maybe even more. But there's one of those that gets, I'm not even entirely sure, but it's selected or elected. One of them is the boss of all 500. So no, I would not necessarily be. I would, quote unquote, just be a regular judge, just working for and by the people.
Sure.
And somebody will be the boss, and that one boss will be then working with you to where you're going to be put, sort of the boss of all these 500 other judges.
Right. Now, I don't have much experience with courts. My lifestyle just never brought me into that. But there were a few times where I showed up with someone to help them out. And also, as a child, I was in the system a lot because of my parents didn't get along and there was like custody battles. And all that. But from what I can recall, every single time it was always a white male. And it's up to their discretion what they deem is the final verdict, right? Which is the power that you're going to hold over either a criminal justice case or a drug case or, a traffic ticket case. That's all going to be something that falls under your jurisdiction, correct?
No, actually not quite correct. So it all depends. So traffic court typically doesn't have a jury, and drug courts and some family law matters typically are not jury trial based. But criminal courts under our Constitution are jury-based. So no, in criminal trials, there's a jury that, first of all, they decide. The jury then, 12 members of the jury of your peers, so to speak, get to decide whether or not the accused defendant is guilty or not guilty, just like you see on TV.
Oh, right, jury duty. Yeah,
exactly.
I have a summons for like November, so yeah, I know.
Yeah. Right. So then there's the jury in those criminal cases, and that's the constitutional requirement in most cases. But then the judge then weighs the evidence and kind of steers, the prosecutors and the defense counsel and how everything is going on in the courtroom, and doesn't actually weigh in on whether or not the defendant is held guilty. That's up to the jury members to decide.
Really?
Then in California, under California state law, the judge then can and will weigh out the sentence with, different factors for, aggravating factors, things that speak for a longer sentence, or mitigating factors, things that speak for a shorter sentence. But no, the judge actually doesn't, in criminal cases, have that much power that they sort of, like you see on TV, find someone guilty or not. That's the jury that does that.
So it's not like TV, and your peers really do determine whether you are guilty or not guilty.
In criminal cases, yes, but you're right. There's so many other cases, like you said. Yep. Family cases and traffic or drugs or whatever. You're right. There, the judge has a lot more discretion. But in criminal cases, because they're considered to be more, serious under the Constitution and might lead to jail time and all of that, then in those cases, you have a right to a jury trial.
Okay, so
which I support, but in other cases, yes, you're right. The judges actually decide a lot in other cases, small claims, drugs, family, all those other types of cases. That is correct.
Right. And so I noticed you mentioned earlier, you teach law, and you said that it's time for someone who hasn't had a prosecutor background to have an opportunity to be a judge, to even out the playing field. So does that mean, did you ever practice law with a firm, or did you decide to stay a professor so that you can continue to shape the minds of other would-be lawyers, and that's kind of where you decided to stay until this opportunity presented itself where you could step in as an election ticket to get into a different role?
Yeah. No, great question. And again, I'm not saying all judges were prosecutors before. I'm doing my PhD dissertation in this, actually, so I'm still counting them, but I just have had to put that on hold for right now. A lot of them do come from sort of the prosecutorial background. It was considered like the way, you became a prosecutor, a deputy district attorney, and then you'd have really great chances of becoming a judge, and you'd become, sort of like the whole how the system has worked. And, that's okay. I'm not critiquing that. And, well, actually, I kind of am in a way. I'm just saying that in LA, and as we know that times change, we need something new. But other people also come from, some people come from other backgrounds. I'm one of those. So no, I never practiced law with a firm. I was never a prosecutor, and I was never a defense counsel. So some people trying to spin that like, oh, that's so bad. But no, that actually is not bad. I think that's really good. I graduated at the top of my law school class, 1 out of 181 students from the University of Oregon School of Law, and which was hard to do. So that's a huge honor. Then I worked.
1 out of 181. Wow.
Yeah. Thank you. And so after that, because that's considered like, and it was like, that was a lot of work, I'll be honest.
Sure.
But presumably also takes some smarts or whatever I've been told. But anyway, so because of that, I was able to work with judges in something that's called a law clerk position, which sounds kind of boring, like you just file cases, but it actually isn't. So the Supreme Court justices and federal judges and others have these law clerks that are like research attorneys. So they, if the public knew how much power, not power, but how much influence they actually have, that sounds a little scary because you think the judge sits and, but he or she's sitting doing all his own research on these, websites. But they actually don't, which I thought initially was kind of scary. They have these law clerks doing that for them and with them, of course. They overlook everything, of course. But I think they actually hire the best of the best and rely on these sharp minds, so to speak, to be able to find out, okay, what would advocate for the plaintiff's position in this case, and what would advocate for the defendant's position? And crucially, what is the law? What does the law really call for? And so that's what I did. And then I proposed these opinions and bench memoranda, but opinions even for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals I worked on, which is considered the second highest court in the nation. But basically doing all of that, of course, monitored and supervised by the judges themselves. But I think that is a strong, strong background. And that's what you see also, that like Trump or Biden, both of them pick judges with that background because they know that, that background is strong. And that's why, you can go on, or I did, to become a real law professor. So a couple of the other candidates are claiming to be law professors and they're not. So people should also watch out for voter influencing. I really am, or sort of tooting, claiming false things, to be honest. So there's a difference between being a real law professor, as I am. That's the title is not protected, so people can call themselves that. A couple of the other folks have taught for online-only schools with really abysmal bar passage rates, where I have taught only for real brick-and-mortar schools with really high bar passage rates, and not these online, mail order or whatever, online outfits that I think are deceiving a lot of consumers, but that's another whole discussion. But I really am actually a real law professor, and as they say, imitation is the most sincere type of flattery. And why I think that's good, that I don't come from the typical, prosecutor or defense counsel background or working for a law firm, is that I am used to working with the law truly neutrally and figuring it out and dealing with what is the law, reading it, writing about it, and dealing with, these big, huge auditorium style classes, dealing with people from many different backgrounds and keeping control of the situation and so forth. So that's my background. But yes, I'm not the typical, prosecutor or, big law firm, partner or, attorney.
Yeah. I'm beginning to see the benefit.
Different. Yep.
I'm beginning to see the benefit of why you should be considered for election, because although it isn't politics, in all things there is politics, right? And when you come from a background of being a part of a firm, there are favors, there are backs to be scratched. And given the fact that you're predominantly a law professor, and that's even harder than becoming just a prosecutor, it turns out, because you have to shape minds of prosecutors and defendant, public defenders, it really does paint the picture differently. And see, a lot of that I wasn't privy to prior to having this conversation with you. So,
I was just going to say, and I agree that backs to be scratched and so forth. And, even if not that, just think about it. So a lot of judges come from prosecutorial backgrounds. So the district attorney's office is, in effect, if you think about it that way, one big law firm, right? Jackie Lacey is currently heading it. She might be elected out, she might not be. But it is, in effect, a law firm. It's paid by the taxpayers. But they have about, I think, 1,400 district attorneys. that all have undergone basically the same training, they're from the same, if you wouldn't want, a whole bunch of judges from the very same law firm, it was a private law firm. And so I'm just saying, I think we need some other voices also
Absolutely.
than just
Absolutely.
from that office. Yep.
It's basically an area that has been completely ignored, and mostly because the public isn't aware. For example, the fact that clerks have that much influence over what the judge sees, and like that's a hand behind the curtain that I didn't even know we should look out for, even in federal government, because who are those nameless and faceless people who aren't getting attention but have so much influence? It's very Shakespearean.
Yeah. And so that again goes into like true politics, like who do you vote for, the Republicans or the Democrats, because they appoint the judges. So for instance, Trump has appointed more than 200 judges and now yet another Supreme Court justice. And when they get appointed and they get seated, they then get to pick their law clerks. And even though, sure, officially the law is, and it is at the lower levels, bipartisan and nonpartisan and so forth, then let's just agree, let's call a spade a spade. In honesty, they will pick probably law clerks, just like the president or the politicians will pick the people that they think align more with their politics. So you're right, it is all politics, but there are things behind the scenes like that. And that's just how, I guess, human nature works or how democracy works. But that's also why it's important, I think, in these elections to weigh in on the seats you can weigh in on locally.
Right. Which is why I went the extra mile, hoping to get some time to speak with someone like you who is on the ballot. I mean, I'm sure there was paperwork you had to figure out and like fill out, and whether you're running for a political position or not, you're still on the ballot. So there was a lot of red tape to go through, and the bureaucracy is crazy in Los Angeles.
And intrigues and sort of. I'm sorry.
No,
go ahead. We overlap.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
No, I was just going to say also the pushback I have gotten from the establishment, which I think is scary. It's a democracy, but the established forces, and we can all guess at who they might be, and the pushback, which may be natural, but is also, I think, has gone a little overboard in what should be an open democracy and letting voters vote and letting me speak my piece and so forth. So you can imagine that. But also just even a thing like, did you know, or did your listeners know that we as candidates for judicial office, and I think other offices too, get to put a 200-word statement on these sample ballots you get? And people have asked me a few times, why didn't you do that? And the reason is that they charge for that. Do you know what they charge for that? So take a guess, for 200 words on the sample ballot. I thought it was a typo or something like that. I read it as $108.80, and they told me, no, it's $108,000.
What?
$108,000 to put 200 words on your ballots or on your ballot statement. Yes.
In order to allow a deeper context for a voter to look at the ballot and have an understanding of who you are, it would cost you out of pocket $108,000?
$108,800. Yes, sir, that's correct. Isn't that amazing? In a democracy in the county of LA, and they base it based on, I don't know, but in judicial seats. So that's why only the millionaires do. Only one person did that in March. But I can't afford that. But I find that, too, to be not very conducive of a democracy, right? Because who could afford that? I couldn't, so I didn't. And that would have been in the official documents, right? But, who can afford that? So that's yet another issue. So,
and I can see how by design that keeps people from, now that forces people to do their research. But if you didn't educate a society to learn how to do proper research or what, to be in the know of what, so that's exactly what that's by design, defaulting people to say, I don't know, I'll vote for this person. And then they threw away their vote.
Yeah, or if you are really rich and 108,000 is pocket change to you, then sure, you could put in your 200-word statement. Why should that not be a democratic right? Why should I not? I also paid $2,100 just to be on the ballot. And so why, as part of my $2,100, should I not have the right to have, 200 measly words put on those? So
Absolutely.
Anyway,
I could build a website and throw on more than 200 words for $16 a month.
Right, yeah. I know, right?
So the payola
so there
is
you
serious.
have it. So,
wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of money, going on too, and a lot of sort of things that people don't know. So thank you so much for pointing out all the information about
Yeah,
this.
no, that definitely helps a lot. I think in closing, because I know I don't want to take too much of your time, but because this is a career based podcast and you are a law professor,
Mm-hmm.
I see it as a perfect
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to ask you if somebody was sincerely considering, let's say, change because of the way the times are right now, and in general, there's
Mm-hmm.
always ups and downs, and
Mm-hmm.
people want to change careers, start
Mm-hmm.
new careers.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say would be the best path for someone to follow if deciding to stepping into law, and 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 specifically, what would be the shortest path you believe, or looking back on
Mm-hmm.
it, how would you have done things differently?
Yeah, so I think not to sound too negative or whatever, but
Sure,
people should
sure.
really reconsider, at least in California, whether they even want to get a law degree or not. Because I think a lot of my students sort of, think that, okay, you get a law degree and you could help shape society and way in. But I will say there's a lot of people that have law degrees in California already. And it tends to be a very elitist, unfortunately, a very elitist society that if you want to work for a law firm, which I don't recommend because they'll kill you with billable hours, it's called, and, working requirements. But they only hire the top 10% of the class out of the top 10 law schools in the nation, mind you. So Harvard, Yale, Stanford, all those. So it's just a very snobby system. So I would caution people to really think about whether they want to do that or whether they want to do something, like you said, a little faster, a little easier, less expensive, such as, there's a lot of paralegals, for instance, that can still work and do is less stressful. There's paralegal certificates. And I'm not touting any school certificates or anything, but I'm just cautioning your listeners to really think carefully about investing 4 years in a night degree or 3 years in a daytime degree, law degree, that might not actually lead to. And it's a tough road, let's put it that way, a real, real tough road. And to be careful about what these law schools, public or private, will promise you, because they too want to sell their stuff, to be honest. And I'm saying
Sure.
that as a public law school, but just for viewer or listener transparency, to really watch out for all the promises that are made about the fortunes and fame you could get. It's competitive. And maybe look into, if people want to change things and they're interested in, medical issues or public health, or, if they, that's like maybe to be honest, better industry right now. Law is just, as a lot of lawyers, is very, very, very cutthroat competitive right now. And lots of people end up being kind of depressed about the whole thing. And it's not so much about, debating. I'm really lucky and I'm really privileged that I have this voice, and thank you again to you. But a lot of people end up being disgruntled because they end up competing and sitting, with a lot of other people and sitting in law firms and not doing what they had hoped to do. But if they want to do it, then I would definitely recommend to maybe look into some evening programs or some accelerated programs or online programs, something. So you don't set aside your whole life for 3 years to get this JD. There's a lot of new things online and hybrid, and a lot of new interesting models from good schools that have specialties that might appeal to people.
I
But
see.
again, to be really sort of watching out for the promises that are made, as I guess is always the case.
And it does seem like there's a lot, obviously, for-profit schools. That's what they're going for, and there are a lot of
Yep.
promises about the riches and fames of
Yep.
law degrees. And I do know a lot of
Yep.
people who have masters and law degrees, and they still can't find a job because
Mm-hmm.
they're either
Right.
overqualified or don't have enough
Yep.
experience. And so I can
Yes.
see how those are all pitfalls. So is there anything else a law
Yeah.
degree can be used for in case someone who's listening does have a law degree, but they don't know how else to take the next step forward? Is there any?
Yeah, and or even want to consider it, because I still think it's a really good. Apart from the fact that it takes so long and so darn hard, and it's so darn hard to pass the bar in California,
Right.
I still think it's a degree that really can help you, like, really sharpen your mind. I think I'm not that smart, but I became a little bit smarter from getting the degree.
Okay.
So it's a good degree, and you're right. There's actually a lot of, they call them JD preferred, where you don't have to have passed the bar necessarily, but that it's a good degree still to have, I think, for getting into like public policy or policy making or even new healthcare things. A lot of different, like, if you're not thinking you're going to be, like, watch out for the promises to be like the sexy, smart lawyers on TV, because that's kind of a tough road in many ways. But you're right to open your mind and look at what other things are out there that, so I don't know, I won't mention, but there's public search websites for law for
Sure.
different job functions or whatever, where people can, you don't have to have passed the bar, but if you're a little open-minded, and it might actually be a happier road than being, to be honest, a paid, hourly, or what do you call it, an attorney with a billable,
Yeah.
hourly billable rate, per year kind of thing. But so just to be a little bit open-minded and to, I guess a lot of us, and me too, I thought too, okay, I'm going to, be an attorney and work for this law firm. Okay, well, I guess not. But to kind of give up maybe what actually may not be the most successful route, but to be open-minded into how else you can contribute, and thinking, like I say, outside of the box, and look at, there's LinkedIn. So there I mentioned it, but a lot of different places where they look for people with JDs without necessarily people having passed the bar, if that's an issue.
Right.
So still lots of good jobs out there, because it is a good degree still, I will say. It really sharpens your pencil.
No, yeah. I will definitely consider that and take it forward with saying thank you for sharing that, because I know a lot of people listening are probably considering where they can change their career, and having someone on
Yeah.
the other end of it saying, look, I mean, you can do it. It's really a crapshoot. Like, it's not as essential anymore because everyone decided to have this type of career, rather it's a doctor or a lawyer. And with that many people in one profession, you're saying.
Right. That is true. So a lot of people also want to be in California, because I will say, if you want to get a law degree, a JD, and work in the Midwest where it's cold and nasty, to be honest, but they're actually looking for employees, not just with JDs, but in other fields as well. And I don't know, so that's something too to consider, that, we all want to be in California, but, that's harder. But there are actually parts in the nation where they're like recruiting actively and dreaming. So for instance, I teach right now for the University of South Dakota School of Law, and we have basically a 100% employment rate. And actually they're, recruiting actively to get people to move out there in that part of the nation, because frankly, not that many people want to be there. But if that was, something you could do for some years, then you can do it. But again, if you're gung-ho on being in California, New York, that's just more competitive. But some people, might want a little bit of a quieter lifestyle and different values, or, whatever. Then you could make it in that field in other parts of the nation. So geography is something to think about too. But we love California.
Yeah,
right?
I have noticed a lot of people are deciding to move. Like, most Californians are going to Texas, and most New Yorkers are going to Florida. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be a massive, massive shift in populace across the nation here, without question, especially as the pandemic continues to rage.
Yeah. But not very many statistics show into sort of the North Midwest or Midwest, for reasons we can imagine, but not discuss here. But if people wouldn't mind that, and there's little pockets of nice little things everywhere. So that's another thing, that there are jobs out there. But the geography is an issue.
Yeah. I lived in New York, and the winters were brutal. But listen, Myanna, I want to roll out the red carpet for you. You're welcome to direct people wherever you want them to go. Let them know where they can find you. If you'd like to be reached out to, the red carpet is rolled out for you.
Hey, thank you so much for that. So I just think a lot of people have looked me up, and you could just Google me. My name is Myanna, Myanna Dellinger, Dellinger. But basically, check out my website, dellingerforjudge.com, and that has also all the Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all that information on it. But I'm pretty accessible, so just Google me and you'll find me.
Awesome. Myanna, thank you very much. Thank you very much for tuning in, for being part of the show.
Thank you so much.
And for educating us.
No, absolutely. Yes, and happy voting. Make the right choices, people.
Yeah.
Important.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Blueprint. I hope it was helpful. And as always, I'm open to feedback. Please follow our guest where they directed you to. And also connect with me on LinkedIn. Or you can even get more personal and connect with me on Instagram. Either way, let's network, let's build, and let me know who else you'd like to hear about, what other industries and professions you're interested in.